Let's start with the plight of the American farmer, because we read various things about bankruptcies and people going out of the business and things like that. Where is the U.S. farmer today?
I think it's quite a varied picture. I mean, we are in a much softer position for the agricultural sector than we were 5 or 6 years ago. You could make the case that we're probably past the worst and that net farm income will be higher this year than it was last year by a little bit. But the source of the cash flow is indicative of the softness, which is to say somewhere in the vicinity of 25% to a third of that net farm income in 2019 will come in from transfer payments in various forms from the government. And as I've said, speaking to you in the past, every farmer would much rather sell their product into an active and successful market to make a living rather than rely on transfer payments.
And one thing we read, there's a piece in the Bloomberg saying this, but I've read it elsewhere as well. When you look at some of the subsidies that are being done right now in connection with the U.S. China trade strife, in fact, they tend to go disproportionately to the big guys. It doesn't trickle down for the most part to the smaller farmers.
I think part of the problem, as I've said before, is it's a rather blunt instrument. If you were selling into a market, that creates one set of results. Trying to sort of smear billions of dollars across a large sector of the economy and get to equitable results is a very complicated and difficult thing to do. The fact that larger producers get more is not dissimilar to the fact that larger producers get more in the marketplace as well. That's just the way that the marketplace is differentiated. It's not different in agriculture than it is in other sectors of the economy where the big people predominate in terms of volume. The smaller people, are by definition smaller and get less of it.
Tom, as you say, it's not a monolith, the farming community. But if you can generalize, if you're a farmer in America and you're feeling it being pretty tight right now, what do you attribute that to? Who do you blame? What do you blame?
Well, that's a great question. And if you ask a bunch of farmers, you're going to get a quite varied and differentiated set of answers, depending on their geography, their political predispositions. People vote on lots of issues. They don't just vote on, their pocketbook, although some do. But their explanation of the pocketbook results that they're experiencing can be quite different. So you could ask one farmer and say, the tariff story, who do you hold responsible? And they might say, well, the president. And you ask another farmer and they might say, the Chinese. You ask them, are you willing to wait as we duke it out in this trade war for a good result? And a lot of them will say, absolutely, I trust the president and they're doing the right thing and I will support them, even though in the short term that costs me a lot of money. Other people might have a different view. So I'm very reluctant to be drawn into, portraying any portion of our customer base as monolithically of this view or that. It's really quite varied.
We're talking with Tom Halverson. He's the CEO of Cobank. When a farmer, recognizes they're not a monolith, but when a farmer wakes up this morning and sees the president say, we're going to impose tariffs on steel and aluminum from Brazil and Argentina, and that's going to help the farmers, can they connect those dots? Because I'm going to say when I first read it, I wasn't sure how the one relates to the other.
On the one hand, I would say that farmers tend to be way above normal in the population in terms of understanding international trade because they are so dependent on it for their livelihood. They tend to pay attention to what's going on in overseas markets where their products get sold. But I think a lot of people would know and understand that the foreign exchange effects with Brazil and Argentina have more to do with the fact that those economies are suffering and underperforming, and their foreign currency position is more a function of that than it is their intention to do anything with respect to agricultural markets. The reality of the pain and suffering economically that U.S. farmers are secondarily experiencing at the hands of Brazil and Argentina is predominantly caused by the fact of the trade war, which means that the Chinese were not exporting agricultural products that we were exporting to China before. That's created an opportunity for people like Brazil and Argentina to fill that market. And because their economies are not performing well and their foreign exchange rate is lower, that just gives them a further tailwind to take market share from us in agricultural commodities.
So as you suggest, the United States, is not exporting soybeans to China. Brazil is instead. Correct. They're stepping in. This has gone on longer than I think a lot of people, including the President of the United States, anticipated that it would. At what point do those trading relationships really get etched in so it's hard to reverse them once this is resolved?
Well, I think we are already well into the phase where you can't just flip a light switch and go back to the status quo ante before all of this began, right? You don't build market share or customer relationships for 25 years and then have this result go on for 2 or 3 years and then have them come right back. We all have to hope and believe and trust that a decent trading arrangement will be put in place, and that we'll have to go back and vigorously compete to reestablish markets that American farmers and the American agricultural complex worked for a generation to build up. I have a lot of confidence in their skills and capabilities in that regard, but it's not just going to, fall back easily.
You know well, in other business sectors, when there's real strife, there's real pressure put on this business sector, there tends to be consolidation.
Yes.
Some people sell out in their consolidation. Are we seeing that in the farming community right now? Will the profile of the American farmer be different at the end of this strife than at the beginning?
I think the answer is yes. There's always cyclical versus structural factors. So the long-term structural aggregation and consolidation of U.S. production agriculture has been going on all of my lifetime. That would have continued anyway. These cyclical factors just intensify those pressures, as you suggest. And farming is one of those industries where the producer tends to be asset rich but cash flow poor, right? They've got a lot of land, they got a lot of equipment, but right now what they're having is cash flow difficulties, and that results in the people who are in the lower quartile by whatever metric, having to do things. Some of them will go bankrupt. Bankruptcies are rising. But the good news is asset values are holding pretty steady. Land values are holding steady. Interest rates are very low, so the capital cost of carrying all your assets is not out of control. It's really a cash flow stress caused by low commodity prices and an inability to sell those products for the price you could 3 or 4 years ago. And that will absolutely accelerate that long-term structural trend of consolidation, whether we like it or don't like it.